Good evening. This is the first meeting of the Employment and Staffing Committee. So the first item is election of chair. Do I have any nominations? Prue?
I would like to nominate Rachel Bishop-Firth.
Okay. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Can we have a vote on that, please? Okay. Rachel, over to you.
Thank you very much. So the next item of business is appointment of a vice chair. Stephen.
Can I propose Prue Gray?
And I'd like to second that nomination. All those in favour? Super. That's everybody. Thank you very much. The next item is apologies for absence. I know that Lou Tinley has given her apologies for absence. I think everybody else is here this evening. Then minutes of the previous meeting. We've got several sets of minutes here. So if we can look at the 24th of March, first of all, have we got any comments on the minutes for that meeting? No? So I propose that we accept the minutes of that meeting. Stephen seconded it. All those in favour? Super. Abstentions? Did you want to abstain? Yes, and Pauline is abstaining, so that's all of us. Nobody opposed. Thanks very much. Declarations. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. I'm going on far too fast because we've got three more. So the next one was for a meeting held on the 4th of April 2025. Have we got any comments about that, Stephen?
No.
Oh, that was a proposing. You were proposing. Okay. Do you want a second, Prue? Because you were there as well. All those in favour accepting? Super. Yes. So I was voting in support of I think Stephen and Prue there, but are we all voting in favour except for yourself, and you would like to be abstaining from that because you weren't present at that meeting? The next one is the 9th of April. I asked for one amendment, which is my name is down, and I wasn't able to make that meeting, unfortunately. So with that amendment, Stephen is proposing...
I'll propose that we accept these minutes. Super.
Prue is seconding. All those in favour of accepting these minutes? Super. And abstentions? And Yusra, are you abstaining from that as well? Yes, so Yusra is abstaining as well. Super. Then the meeting minutes for the 11th of April, and again my name was down, even though I wasn't present at the meeting. But with that exception, Stephen again is proposing, Prue is seconding. All those in favour of accepting that? Super. And abstentions? Super. And Yusra, are you abstaining from that as well?
Sorry, which one is this?
The 11th. You were, yes. Okay, so you're in favour. You're in favour, and Pauline and Rachel abstained. Okay, super. Great. So, declarations of interest. Does anybody have a declaration of interest? No declarations of interest. I'm guessing we have no questions from the public. Do we have any member questions? No. So, in that case, we can hand over to... sorry, I should have said Town and Parish Council question time. We don't have any of those either. So, with that, we can go to the first main item of business tonight, which is the annual pay policy. Now, this is something which we are bringing to this committee for the first time. One of the things that Louise and I wanted to do was for this group to be able to see and to consider the pay policy statement before it goes to full council. so that we can have debate and we can have input. One of the things that Rachel Burgess, you wanted to see in here was a mention of the gender pay gap, and you will see that is in there. I think there's a couple of important changes that have come through since this was published, and Louise is going to introduce this and talk us through that.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Yes, so we published the papers on the 21st of July, and one of the important things that has happened since then, we've then had the pay settlements come in for JNC and NJC as well, so all set of pay settlements have come in. So that's going to mean that the figures that we have initially worked with here are not going to be up to date. They were correct at the time of printing, but they will not be correct with the new pay settlement that has now been received. I think another important point to also make about that as well, and another thing that I did discuss with Rachel, and we should have put into this report, is reference to the living wage and the real living wage, because one of the points to make about this is prior to the pay settlement, we would have been below the real living wage. Now the pay settlement has been made, the real living wage is £12.60. Our lowest point on our grading system is now at £12.65. So we're just in the process of publishing all of that information, and I think it's quite an important point to make, and something that's been a point of discussion. So whilst our figures and our ratios in here are absolutely correct for the time that we wrote it, since that point it has been changed, and we will need to make some changes to this report because it's going to council, and it would not be appropriate for me to send a report that is out of date with incorrect figures on it. Just going to make some other very quick points. There's a couple of references to Personnel Board where we've started to make reference to Employment and Staffing Committee, so my apologies where we haven't quite been succinct with that. I will make sure next time that we are looking at that. And there's one place in the report, which again, this is quite important, at 5.2, for some reason. We have the 1st of April 2024 there, and it should be 25. So again, just wanting to make sure that point. I can see there's questions, so I will be quiet at that point.
Super. I think Pauline, I saw you.
The first one was a general one about it. Why is it called a pay strategy if it's got all this detail in it which goes out of date all the time? Surely a strategy isn't something that should be. So I don't understand why it's got data that goes out of date, or maybe the name's wrong.
I think it's a pay policy statement.
So it's not a pay strategy?
No, did I call it a pay strategy? I didn't think
I thought you did.
My apologies if I did. No, it's a pay policy statement. It's from the Localism Act from 2011. It's something we have to do annually. When I say it's a technical paper, there is technicalities that we must have in the content, so the ratios must be in there. We need to demonstrate sort of elements of our pay. So again, from a transparency perspective, that is in there. You will see that all other local authorities will have a similar looking report. It's pretty much, you will be able to follow that they are the same, but there are similar structures. So if I did use that term, I step back, but it's fine. It's a pay policy statement, so it does change yearly, which is why we bring this report in on an annual basis.
So I've got a couple of more detailed questions. The apprenticeship contracts you're talking about, how much do they get paid?
Again, there is a salary range. Off the top of my head, I think it starts at 24,000 and something. I would have to just go back. It lies with that first salary point. We don't go below that salary point, and it's graded up depending on the level of the apprenticeship.
And why are they excluded from all the report? Is that intentional?
It's just again how the report.
It's how you're told to do it.
How you're told to do it. Yes, how the report.
And so when you've got your report, the median salary at 39,513.
Yeah.
Does that include any special payments, increments?
No.
I noticed further on, so it's a bit misleading if you're giving people special pay amounts that aren't in that. So you've got a lot of personal salaries, for want of a better word.
Yeah.
So skills payments or whatever they are.
Yeah.
Surely they should be in that number? Because it's still part of your salary.
Yeah, I suppose the point is that those things can all be removed. Those things are all elements
We're still
that
paying
could be removed.
I think it artificially depresses the median, potentially.
Yeah, I understand, absolutely do understand the point you make. I think just from the point of view of this is how we're told to pull the figures together. So again, this is the guidance that we're actually given to actually pull that median figure together.
So if you worked it out with, I don't expect you to know now.
I might not know that off the top of my head. I need to go and have a look.
If you could you tell us what it would be
Yeah,
if
of
you
course.
included all those special payments?
Yeah.
Because I'm not saying you do, but if you get to the point that some places end up with, where everybody's got some form of special payment, it will end up looking like people are paid less than they actually are.
Yeah, and I need to just check myself. I would like to check myself on that statement that I've just made as well, because as I say, I like to be accurate. So I will double check that and come back to the committee and confirm. I'll write back to you.
Thank you. And the further questions that this generated for me was how many people are at top of grade, what percentage of people? Again, I read it today, otherwise I would have sent you a list of questions, sorry. And also, you said you can progress by more than one increment on exceptional performance. How often does that happen? And conversely, how often do people not get increments? Because you say you can withhold them in the event of unsatisfactory performance, and you can't all be perfect. So how many unsatisfactory performances do you have, and how many extra special one-off extra increments do you have?
I can look into that.
And are there any other additional payments apart from the...
I think we name those within this document.
Yeah, there aren't any others that aren't named, is what I'm saying.
Sorry, what was that last question?
Well, you talk about the special payments for scarce skills
Yep.
that you can't get recruit and the salary.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that is special payments that we're not...
There may be specific
Talking
allowances, but then again,
That's
they would
different.
be again within the
Yeah, that's
NJC. They would be defined as specific allowances for a specific piece of work they're doing. Could be shift, etc.
The returning officer gets one of those.
Yes.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So another question was, you said you generally don't use your discretion to enhance pensions. What do you mean by generally?
There's a policy that would allow us to do that, but we haven't done that, and there is a process that we would need to follow to get that agreement, and I think that's written up within the Constitution.
So you are following a policy?
Yeah, following policy, yeah.
That's it, thank you.
Super, thank you. I think Prue's been waiting a while, and then Rachel and Yusra.
My extra point is really a very trivial, but I'm really sorry about this, Louise, but at the top of page 25 under item 7, you've got a March 2024 for the gender pay gap, and I think you might mean March 2025 again.
I don't actually on that particular occasion.
Right.
I'll explain.
Right, yes, because I wondered, because I'm quite interested in that pay gap. I don't know whether that was what Rachel was going to ask about.
Yeah, absolutely. I can absolutely explain. So one of the things that came from Council back in 2024 was that we made no mention of the gender pay gap. So what we wanted to do was make sure that we corrected that. And so we have added that element into this particular report. We are just in the process of finalising 2025's report, and I can give you the high-level figures of 2025, and what, again, my intention is that, again, we would update that with 2025's figures. That is the absolute intention. I think after our discussion, I think it was at March's then Personnel Board, we had quite a lot of discussion, so we're getting into the detail that sits behind it. We've been in contact with the LGA, for example, just checking ourselves from a technical perspective, are we applying it correctly? Feedback we've had so far, we are. And one of the things that is notoriously quite difficult, it's the different professions that we have that make up the council, and all councils are so different with regard to what they have outsourced, insourced, etc. But we are still doing some work on that, so that when we come back to committee, I feel that we'll be able to hopefully interrogate that a little bit more, and just give you a little bit more information, as I say, because I think we had a really good discussion last year. I think the other point to make about that is the LGA looked at last year's, and we were correct in how we'd applied everything. We hadn't done anything that was incorrect, but obviously you always strive to look at changing that gap, I think, and that's what we obviously would want to do. So just as I said, the headline figures that I can just give you, so our mean gender pay gap for 2025 is coming out at 11.49%, which is compared to 11.83% in 2024. And the medium gap has gone down quite a bit. It's gone, in 2025, it's now 11.6%, whereas in 24 it was 15.7%. There will be a full report coming on gender pay, and I think it's programmed for September. So we will be making sure that we are also bringing that discussion to you a little bit earlier, because again, we brought that in March as committee. Hopefully that answers your questions. I will be quiet.
Yes, it's all part of getting the figures to you as soon as we can.
Yes.
Which is excellent. Can I have my final thing,
Yes.
which is you need to update the information for this year. Are we going to get this report back to us and then it goes to council? What's the sequence of events?
I think that would be a really good idea. I think we should be bringing this report back to you in September with those updated figures. As I say, it was never the plan that we would be in this sort of scenario. It's very early. Sometimes you get some, but as I say, it's very unusual for the NJC settlement to have already been made. But yeah, it just has made the report feel not quite right. But I can pick up a lot of the questions that I've had. So.
Yes, and I think, you know, Pauline, for example, you've asked a number of questions tonight, and it gives the opportunity for people to look at the structure of the report, where we are so far, and to feed in to that, so that what goes to council in the autumn, to full council in the autumn, is absolutely what this group would like to see. Super. I think we had Rachel, and then Yusra, and then Stephen. Yours has been answered. Super.
Okay, thank you. Just a few quick questions on this. So, page 22, it talks about the spot salaries for chief officers, and it says that we seek to position those appropriately in the market in terms of pay. So, how often are those spot salaries benchmarked against the market, and what sort of criteria do you use to look at whether they need to be adjusted up or down, or how does that process work for those spot salaries?
With regard to the spot salaries, what we tend to do again is use benchmarking material. We have to be really careful with just using salary figures. The other part of what we do is also look at job content of roles. So this tends to be for our chief executive and for our level 2, tier 2 director roles are all on spot salaries, which is actually quite unusual in this sort of world, because they tend to be on a grade. There tends to be a grading system that is in place, but Wokinham's had that spot salary. So I would say, to answer your question, annually that we would look. We don't bring that in. Obviously, if we got to change it, we don't have the power to make those changes. That would have to come through this particular committee, and I think even maybe to council, depending on certain elements of it. But yeah.
Okay, so it's reviewed by a group, say in HR or sort of
HR,
some sort of management group.
Yes.
Then if a change is required, it would need further governance.
Then we would need to do a further report to make that recommendation. And then depending on who we're discussing, we would go through the appropriate statutory officers as well, to sort of make sure that one's not reviewing their own. So just wanted to make sure. So
Okay, thank you.
We have. So we bought the chief executive salary, I want to say a couple of years ago. And it was absolutely done on that by that in that methodology. We also had the change to the chief operating officer last year. And again, we did quite a lot of work around comparison of job content within that. Yes, we will look at the figures because also from a market perspective, you've got to be competitive as much as we possibly can within the remit of obviously being working in the council.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the pay ratios. So the highest to lowest pay ratio is 7.6 to 1.
Yep.
Do you know how that compares with other authorities?
Yes, I do. We sit sort of in the middle. I do make reference to it. I appreciate it's only reference at 6.2 about sitting sort of in the midpoint. These are all published reports, so things that I'm sharing here are published. It ranges from the lowest to highest, the highest to lowest, apologies, from 8.1, I think the lowest goes down to 7.22. One of the Berkshire councils doesn't appear to have actually issued theirs yet.
Okay, thank you.
And it's similar just on the median as well.
Yes, okay, that's fine, thank you. And then it's good to hear about the real living wage in terms of the people we pay. Is there any progress on pursuing accreditation to be a living wage employer? Obviously, I know that includes, suppliers, and it's a much bigger deal, but I know that we asked about that a few years ago. I don't know if there's any progress on that.
Sorry, Chair, is that all right for me to
yes,
answer?
yes, absolutely, yes.
It's something that I speak with Rachel on quite a lot with regard to looking at the forward programme and whether or not we could look at this with regard to that accreditation. What I'm pleased to know is that, as I say, for our own staff, that we are looking at that salary range. It's something that we can have a further discussion on and have a look at.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, just to say, I think with the suppliers question, because social value is such a big part of the new Procurement Act, you may well find that actually all of your suppliers are actually compliant anyway. So it might not actually be as big a deal as it might seem to get the accreditation.
Yeah, absolutely, something we'll have a look at.
But it is something that we look at every year, isn't it? And make sure that our lowest salary, as it is this year, is now, thanks to the pay increase, it is above that £12.60. Real
it was more about the actual accreditation that I was wondering about, but I
we'll
appreciate
have a look at the accreditation in the wider scope.
Super. And then Yusra.
Thank you. How often is the pay policy statement updated?
So with a requirement for us to update it annually and to bring it into this committee annually and then on to council. As I say, this year, I think we're going to be doing it twice because of obviously we can't go to council with out-of-date information, but it's normally an annual thing.
Okay. So does the pay policy include the living wage? Like many councils, including WBC, commit paying the real living wage?
Yeah, so I think within my introduction, I think we were just mentioning about making sure that's something we talk about within this report going forward. And as I said, just making the commitment there to look at the accreditation and whether or not it's something we could pursue. So yes, it's something that we'll put onto our forward plan to have a look at.
So at the moment it's not higher than national living wage?
It is actually. So we've now literally, just because the real living wage was set on the 1st of May, we are now we've just received the pay settlement, which will be backdated to the 1st of April, and that payment will be made in August. So I suppose it's in transition at the moment in the fact of it hasn't actually happened. Was that the question you asked?
Yeah, that's fine, but if I ask you, like, how, what's the percentage of increase?
What was the increase?
What's the increase,
It was 3.2%.
3.2 in terms of national...
That was the national pay settlement.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, So is this mentioned in the latest statement?
Not yet, because as I say, I only received that information on, I think it was the 23rd of July.
It was the 23rd, it was decided,
yes, and I think we published on the 21st of July. So hence the reason why the information that's in the report is not.
So is this a work in progress?
Yes, and we'll bring it back in September.
Okay, thank you.
And it might be useful for me to add that there's actually three figures that we look at. So there's the national minimum wage, there's the national living wage, and then there is the real living wage, which is a voluntary floor, and that is higher than the national minimum wage and the national living wage.
Yes,
Our lowest salary is higher than the highest of those three. So we have ticks in the boxes for all three of those wages.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, yeah.
And I'd actually check that as well, because I know that the national minimum wage is 12.21. So yes, we have got three different areas. So.
Pauline.
Just a quick point on the accreditation. I'm just a little bit concerned to, you know, somebody's about to take 50 million quid out of our revenue funding. Unless accreditation has a benefit to the employees or the residents, I'd be keen not to spend money on doing things that actually just give us a badge but don't actually give us any benefit, bearing in mind we're going to have a lot less money and a lot less time and effort available to us. So it's just a, you know, if we are going to do that, can we please understand what the benefit is before we spend too much time on it?
I think that's a very good point, and I think there are other things that we probably want to consider. So the government, for example, has made a commitment that there is going to be a guaranteed living wage. I think I'm getting that terminology right. So I think we would need to consider any movement on moving towards real living wage accreditation, taking all of these factors into account.
I just worry that we spend money on badge collecting rather than things that actually benefit residents and the staff. And if it benefits residents and staff, great. But if all it is a tick for the council, then I can think of better things to spend the money on.
I'll look, as I said, I'll do some exploratory into it and have a look at that.
Fantastic. So are there any final questions? Prue. Yes.
It's related but not entirely. Do we check that all our suppliers are paying at least the minimum wage?
I'm absolutely sure that we do. Because
Right.
it's yeah.
Yes.
I'm going to double check myself, but
Yes.
I'm absolutely sure through our procurement processes
Yes,
that
that's
we would
what I thought.
absolutely have to do
Because
that.
I am concerned, I take Pauline's point, but people who earn very little money tend to then have to claim benefits, and then they are struggling with other things. The money's not in our economy locally, and it gets very difficult. So there's a balance to be struck, but I do take Pauline's point about we don't have money for additional activities, I don't think, at the moment.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting we should take on suppliers. I'm not entirely convinced we need the cherry on top of the cake. I'm just happy with the cake if it has a benefit.
Yeah, I think the biggest area which could be difficult is within care, and we just need to look at that. And as I say, that's why I'll do some exploratory work. Obviously, minimum wage I know is always paid, so there's no issue from that perspective at all.
How does the government check? Surely it's their job as well.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch what you said there, Pauline.
How does the government check people are paying minimum wage? I'm pretty sure we used to have to put in pay data and statements to the ONS, but it'd be interesting just to know, because actually we shouldn't be, again, we haven't got the resources to start doing everybody else's job as well as our own. So it would be interesting to know that we're not double bagging it and we're not doing something that somebody else is meant to do. By all means, point it out to them, and I agree it should be in the procurement processes because that's the right place to catch it.
And I know that our procurement processes do look very carefully to make sure that we are engaging with organisations who work in line with our values. So that would be, I'd be certain that we would be checking that that they are paying, the legal minimum to people. But we go above that. So, for example, we make sure that they are working in accordance with the Equality Act 2010 and other equality legislation. Super. So, if there's no more questions, the recommendation is that the Personnel Board approves the pay policy statement for recommendation to full council, and I guess we would have to add in subject to the changes that you will make and bring back to us in September.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So I would propose that, seconded by Stephen. All those in favour? All in favour. Thank you very much. So, The next item on the agenda is the agency worker report, quarter 4, which I think is a bit of a triumph for Louise and the team, this one. So our agency and our contract workers are a very valued part of our staff. Agency and contract staff very often can provide us with specialist skills on a turn-on, turn-off basis. So they enable us to deliver to our residents, and often they are, because they are a turn-on, turn-off resource, we use them when we need them and only when we need them. They can be the cheapest way of resourcing our projects as well. At the same time, there are quite a number of areas that Louise and her team have identified where our ideal would be to be employing these people, and that might be on a permanent contract or it might be on a fixed-term contract, depending on what our needs are. And where we need people in the longer term, very often it is more cost-effective to bring those people in as employees of the council. And with that in mind, I think some of the figures that we're seeing there on page 27, the first page of this report, really do show us moving in the right direction, saving money, and moving people from being on agency contracts into employment contracts. So I will pass over to Louise to introduce that.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, this is the agency report, quarter 4, 24-25, which then brings us the year end as well, so we get that comparison. We have seen a reduction in spend comparing the 2 years of just over £2 million. I have to say that's something that is, yes, the HR team absolutely help and facilitate, but that's something across the whole of the council, all of our managers, etc., with regard to how they're now recruiting and looking at where they're using agency for its best cause, and for the fact that it's then covering and making sure that the services out to our community are covered to their best ability. Because as you will see, if you actually do a comparison on the numbers of staff between the two quarter 4s of 23-24 and 24-25, we do actually see an increase in numbers. There are graphs within the report which just shows where things have gone up and down throughout the year. But I think it's just something to say that there is, I think it's something that we've also been working on from the point of view of where we've had interim roles. So we have been looking at making sure that we have permanent staff into those particular posts, and using our agency where there are still, and there will always be, those skill areas where it is difficult to recruit. I also note, and I don't know if you have got your heads round, but we try to put a case study in at the back of the report on page 31, just trying to demonstrate how we try and use agency to get the best for the council and get the cover. Very much looking, when you start to look at this comparison of cost avoidance, you have to look quite closely at this, and appreciate it may not be at the committee that you want to look at it, but it's just sort of making sure that what we're trying to get our officers to sort of realise is that sometimes taking an agency on for 3 months, say as a social worker, whilst you then recruit into the role permanently, can be very fortuitous, and actually just gives you that flexibility and the turn on, turn off type skill available to you. As I said, I'm happy to try and talk you through that if you have any questions, but equally, but what we're just trying to show there is just there's cost avoidance, because I think that's the other thing to just be quite clear about when we're using agency, is cost avoidance, not necessarily saving. We've also done some work in children's, which we hope to start to see come to fruition in our figures in 25-26, where we're looking at SEND staff and getting a permanent structure within our SEND team as well. And as I say, we're not just allowing where those shortages are in skill just to happen. We are constantly reviewing them, talking to directors, managers, etc., about different approaches we can take.
Super, thank you. And Rachel, you've got a question, and then Yusra.
Thank you. Yeah, could you just say a bit more about that divergence between the costs going, because the costs have gone down a lot, right? relative to the total spend. But obviously, as you say, the numbers have gone up. So what's the kind of change in strategy that's caused that kind of divergence of those figures?
We now go through Matrix, which is the one place where you do, we've now mandated that that's how we take on agencies. So we've got much better rates of pay that are set within that contract. That's definitely been the work that's had the biggest change, and it just has taken a little while for it to catch up with itself, because obviously we're comparing. I think the numbers are being used, say for example in a service, so as I mentioned, and I'm sorry if I keep going on about social workers, but it's just a really key area that you cannot have gaps within that service. So often it's numbers, it's not about the highest paid salaries. And I think the point I was also looking to make, and maybe not terribly eloquently, is where we're ensuring that our service director roles are now moving into permanent. So we're looking at all of the tiers within our organisation all the way through, not just in the highest, but that's also having an impact then on those figures. So there's a combination of different approaches that we've been taking. I want to keep watching that to make sure that, as I say, this is something we sustain, because I think that's quite important. And obviously we come back in here quarterly, so we will be watching how if we see any further changes.
Super. Yusra and then Pauline.
Thank you. Are there any apprenticeships or grow your own initiatives to fill the skills gaps internally?
Yes, there are. We've been doing a lot of work around our apprenticeships, and not just about bringing in maybe the traditional apprentice that is obviously from a skills perspective, and having that sort of arena where we are growing our own. Yes, it is through our apprentices, but we're also looking at people that are already in the council working for us. How can we also look at their skills and knowledge through the apprenticeship scheme, because you again can do apprenticeship through that. Highways is something that is notoriously quite difficult from a skills point of view for us to do, and we're not making an impact, I have to say, at the moment in that particular area. I think there are opportunities where perhaps we could be having, and we do have discussions across councils to sort of learn from each other about maybe different approaches. But also within HR, and we are then looking at sort of those career paths, career opportunities. There's been a lot of success in the social worker arena, and again I know that they've got teams that, they've got 1 to 2 people that are dedicated to that, to make sure that again that we are looking at growing our own. So we do sometimes bring in our apprenticeship information, and again maybe that's something we could put onto a forward plan, so we can again share the actual facts rather than that more general approach that I've given you.
So where is that information, the apprenticeship programs? Like, is it on LinkedIn or Buckingham Borough website?
Well, any apprentice
just internally.
it's internal. So the actual
Okay.
data we hold, we have information that I hold, and we review it on a quarterly basis around our numbers of apprentices. So and we have, as I say, come in with that report into this committee. So perhaps, Chair, we could arrange for that to come back in.
It is something that we have discussed previously, hasn't it? Because I think training up apprenticeships in some of our scarcity areas, and again social work I think is one of them, is one of the things that you have done to reduce our reliance on agency and contract social workers, because that was one of the areas that you identified that we could actually grow our own, to use the phrase that you used, Yusra, and then be able to employ these people as opposed to contracting. And that there are other things that we've got lots of
we've got other ideas as well.
I think that would be
use
good
it for.
idea.
So I'm very happy if that's okay with committee to bring something on that at a later date.
So if I ask you, like, how does the council benchmark its agency worker usage against similar local authorities?
How does it, benchmark which?
How does the council benchmark its agency worker usage against similar local authorities?
Again, we do look for reports with regard to, and we do actually share that data between us.
But there is no set benchmark.
There's not I mean, it's looking for similar reports that are going to this similar committee, and it's something that I think we probably all look at with regard to, but no, there's not a requirement for us to do this. We've always taken quite a transparent approach.
But is there any particular reason that why it is not required here in this council?
No, we do here, as I say, because we bring this in quarterly. So this report is public. So this is a public report. I don't think what I'm saying is I don't think it's an actual requirement of a council to do that. I appreciate this. They have financial and budget requirements that they must be publishing, and I'm sure it's within their financial finances somewhere. It's just probably finding that information.
And I think there are things as well, aren't there? Like, it can be that if a particular council is, for example, doing a number of highways projects, the number of contract workers that they're going to use is going to be higher than a council who might otherwise be a comparator. So it's quite hard to compare apples with apples when you're looking at agency and contract worker usage. But I know, again, and it is something that we have discussed in this committee, we do periodically look to compare ourselves to other councils as much as we can.
I will always try and benchmark wherever I possibly can. So it's something that we do try to actively do, because as I say, it's trying to compare yourself, but sometimes it's not apples with apples. So it's just making sure that we're aware of that. But I will note that and see if there's any further information I can find.
Yeah. Thank you.
And there's definitely an interest being expressed in hearing about apprenticeships. I think that's one of the things.
This is really crucial. To improve council and budgeting and financial constraints.
I'm sure I want to sort of say we were up to a figure of around 129 apprentice people on
that's good to know.
So they've even apprenticed or on an apprenticeship scheme, but it's probably at the highest that we've been for quite a period of time. So it's something that we know it's important. We have the apprentice levy, and it's ensuring that we're maximising that as much as we possibly can, and that we are then giving those skills opportunities across the council. So there's a lot of work, and I think there's probably more we can share at a later date around some of that.
And what our neighbouring councils are doing, are we aware of it?
They're doing similar things, again with their apprenticeships. Often there are discussions around types of skills that perhaps we're looking for. Building surveyors is another one that is very difficult as well. But it's not always something that's easy to grow your own, and I think there's some work to do maybe around skills that we could look at with colleges, etc., and maybe there's some sort of further work we can do. But as I say, we try to maximise as much as we can and look for initiatives to help.
Yeah, I'm sure about it.
Super. Thank you, Yusra. And I think Pauline, you were next.
Thank you. Your graph on total agency quarterly costings looks remarkably similar to your graph on quarterly agency spend, apart from it's got a different quarter at the start. Is that just the same data presented in two different graphs?
I think it is, yeah.
Can we get rid of one of them? I spent quite a bit of time wondering why one was going up and the monthly headcount was going down, and then I realised that it was quarterly. It'd be much better if that total agency costings one was monthly, the same as the graph below it, so you could see the unit cost impact. But I think that and that are the same data.
Let me check.
Looks like it to me.
It looks slightly different. I'll have a look. I'll have a look. Yeah.
And quarter four spend across directorates and total. And this is it's very picky. So, if this is going anywhere else, you've got spurious commas and.
Oh yes, we have.
So I sat there and thought 224 million, then I realised there was a zero missing.
Yeah.
There shouldn't be a comma there, and in fact there really shouldn't be pence in this table, I don't think.
Yeah.
To be honest, so
I will pick that up.
If we could kill those and get rid of the comma, that would be good.
It's misleading.
I think what might
be confusing.
Actually, if we did this as thousands, because it just eliminates loads and loads of zeros everywhere, and it become much easier.
Well, those zeros are pennies,
to read.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
so it's even less useful.
Yes.
Um,
I'm not quite
and
sure
with a
why
comma,
we've got
comma
that.
in front of them, it was very confusing.
Yeah.
It must be European.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I'll get that corrected. Yeah.
Thank you. And there was just one final question about the uptick at the end of the year for adult social care and chief executive. Just interested as to why. I mean, the chief executive one's a very small figure, I agree, but it's quite a significant increase.
Again, I'm really sorry, Pauline, I didn't quite hear the question. Do you mind just repeating that?
So on page 27,
Yeah.
adult social care and chief executive upticks in Q4, and the chief executive one, although it's a small number, goes up by 30%, and the adult social care one goes up by 25% roughly. I'm just wondering why. That's all.
I thought it should be in the... I'll have a little look at that. Generally, I know sometimes it can be, and I'm just sort of, I know sometimes it can be connected to grants that come in, and it's making sure that those have been spent, and that then sounds inappropriate. I don't mean just spending it for the sake of it. I do mean assigning the monies correctly, but sometimes if you're not going to... Anyway, let me just double check it rather than try and explain something that it might be incorrect. Yeah, absolutely. So let me just check.
Super. Stephen.
Thank you. Just on Pauline's last point, I think there are always fluctuations, and there will be a need to take on particular people at a particular moment. There may be grant funding becomes available at a particular moment and becomes apparent in that quarter's figures. So there will always be fluctuations. My comments really, and they are comments, I'm afraid, not a question. At least you don't have to answer a comment. Go back to Yusra's points about homegrown opportunities. I think we have a good reputation, a good record on that. We do try to grow our own. And I think we perhaps go even farther than that. We try to encourage directly and indirectly local recruitment. One of the things that might be counted as indirect in that sense is that we have a really good, and I say this having talked to some of the users of this service, a really good support for those young people either in undergraduate or A-levels who are wanting to come and get work experience at the council just for a few weeks in the summer. And I think we enhance our reputation as an employer with those people. And in the long term, some of them may decide to make their careers in local authorities and maybe in Wokingham. So, you know, that's a really good thing. And that's hats off to our Democratic Services colleagues who organise that programme and do an extremely good job on it. I also would highlight that although we do want to grow our own, we also want to take advantage of high-quality people who don't currently work within the organisation. And again, it's worth emphasising something we didn't talk about at all. We talked about apprenticeships, which obviously are open to people both within and outside the organisation. But there's also our graduate schemes, which again, you know, I've had the pleasure of meeting the graduates several years running, a couple of years running at least, on these schemes. They're all really enjoying their experience at Wokingham. They may well go off to other councils, but some may well come back here. And that is good. You know, the quality of the experience we're giving these young people is good. They are good, high-quality people. Again, I've had some feedback from them, which is very positive about their experience. So I think we're doing a lot of things to attract people. And currently, I think we have a good reputation as an employer, which is helping to draw people to us. Our challenge is obviously going to be when neighbouring councils have more money than we do. That's going to be more difficult. We already have that challenge to some extent with Bracknell, where salaries include an outer London weighting component. So we're competing with somewhere that already offers higher salaries. But for the most part, we're competing successfully. because people feel comfortable here, they feel it's a good place to work.
So if I ask you, like, how many would like to stay here after having an apprenticeship program?
I
Do they really
wouldn't be
enjoy
able to give you an answer, and I don't think you always get people staying immediately. People move around in local government, but it's remarkable how many return to places that they've been to before. They might move around because they've got transferable skills that can be used in any local authority, or many local authorities anyway. But we have a remarkable number of returners, people who go off somewhere else and then come back. That is a very positive thing, I think.
And that might be something that we might be able to look at when we come back to this group to talk about apprenticeships. I mean, returners might be quite hard to measure, but retention might be easier.
I think in places I do know there's definitely been someone that's returned after they've had done their apprenticeship.
Stephen?
We have quite a lot of returners more generally. One of the things that I do regularly is with Susan, our Chief Executive, we go to sessions, induction sessions for new staff. We have them about quarterly, I would guess. Those are really interesting sessions, and we hear from the 30, 40 people in the room about their experiences, what part of the council they work for, and the number of them that say, well, I worked here before, I went off somewhere else, I'm now back here, and I'm really enjoying being back here. I think that speaks volumes.
So if I ask you, like, which area is popular, like housing, health, social care?
Well, I can't give you a kind of very
Like
detailed answer to that.
because you
At
told-
those induction sessions, what's striking is people are coming from all areas of the council.
Okay, so it's
And
the
these kind
generic
of
one,
comments are being made in relation to many areas of the council, not just one or two. So this is more about a corporate feel more than a specific directoral or departmental feel, I think,
Okay.
which is encouraging. I mean, that's what you want, people to
Yes,
want
it
to
is, yeah.
feel
They have a wider
as though they have a
vision,
commitment to the organisation as a whole, not just to the little bit they work in.
Yeah, thank you.
Super, thank you. And Stephen, you had your hand up earlier, and I don't know if you've been able to make the point that you were wanting to make, or...
I was really wanting to just come back on
Yeah.
I was really just wanting to just respond to some of the points Yusra had raised, and I think I've more
You've
than
had
done that enough.
opportunity. Fantastic. Are there any more questions? Or this is a one where we note the information. Do we vote on that to note the information? So
Yeah.
I would.
No, we don't need to vote.
We don't need to
I
vote.
think it's Madeline that's better than me.
We'll take that. We've noted
I
it.
think we just note.
Fantastic. So we are into any other items in that case, and unusually we do have another item, which is the interim programme director. I think Lou, if you'd like to introduce that, and then I'm going to pass over to Stephen, who has a deep understanding of this role via the Berkshire Prosperity Board. So Lou, if I hand over to you.
Yes, sorry, councillors. Yeah, I did sort of send a note out on this today. It's just really purely from a transparency perspective. From a constitution perspective, we have made sure that we've gone through the appropriate process with regard to advertising this particular role. It is a joint role between the 6 Berkshire councils. There's a summary that sort of states out that's looking at the devolution white paper, and that would be sort of some of the key sort of areas. I think I also shared the job description as well, and the advert, just again for information. Obviously, each council takes on a role with regard to what it's doing, and it's through our constitution that we are doing the actual recruitment. So hence the reason why I wanted to write the paper and make sure that we were sharing this with the Employment and Staffing Committee from an awareness perspective. It would report into the Prosperity Board and the the SRO at this point in time is the Chief Executive of Reading for this particular item. There's timescales on there as well with regard to when we will be looking to do the recruitment process. And I think the other point I just wanted to make is that the interview panel would be a joint appointment, and it would be the 6 leaders or their representatives that would be on that panel, alongside then the SRO and our own Chief Executive at that panel. I think that was all my points, but I can, if there's any sort of technical recruitment, obviously I can.
Yeah, thank you, Louise. I think Rachel rather flatters me. I don't know whether I've got deep knowledge and understanding. But what I think I do know is a bit about background, and it may be helpful to give you a sense of the background so you can better understand why we are where we are. The first point to make is that discussion about devolution began under the previous government, and the previous government invited expressions of interest to be submitted. And now the 6 Berkshire leaders, in response to this, decided to submit an expression of interest for a Berkshire strategic authority. But we made it clear we wanted to go down the non-mayoral route. Now, by the time we got a response to that submission of interest, there'd been a change of government, and the new government, in the form of the Minister for Local Government, Jim McMahon, wrote to us and said, we're interested in your proposal, but we'd be much more interested if you were prepared to go down the mayoral route. And the new government clearly is really only interested in the mayoral route. At that stage, we were forming a Berkshire Prosperity Board. It then formally was constituted during the course of last year, and it was envisaged as a possible vehicle for moving towards a strategic authority. But in the short term, it was envisaged simply as a means of putting us in a stronger position to bid for external funding. And we had some successes in that. We have secured some external funding that I don't think we would have got if we'd bid as individual councils, infrastructure projects in particular. The next stage was that the new government made clear what it was looking for, and there essentially were 3 strands to this when they started talking about it. The first was they wanted all parts of England to be within a mayoral strategic authority, and they made it clear they didn't want any, as they described it, orphans, little bits that were missed out. They wanted it to cover the whole of England, and they wanted all of those mayors alongside the First Ministers in Scotland and Wales to sit with government ministers in a council of the nations and regions. So that was the vision of government for mayoral strategic authorities. They also unveiled 2 other proposals. One was to convert all existing counties and districts into unitary councils, to abolish all counties and districts elected into unitary councils. And they also published figures on what they thought were the appropriate population sizes, both for mayoral strategic authorities and for unitary councils. Now, none of the existing unitary councils, and of course all of the Berkshire councils are unitary councils, have been since 1998. All of the London authorities are unitary councils. None of the existing unitary councils, or very few of them, actually conformed with the government's new figures. Since then, I think the government have watered down the commitment to these figures and now talk about them as guidelines rather than prescribed figures that must be complied with. So they're allowing much more flexibility, both in the way in which they look at potential new unitaries and in the way in which they look at mayoral strategic authorities. But it became abundantly clear that the new government, even though it wasn't going to press existing unitaries to change, was committed to the abolition of counties and districts and the creation of new unitaries, and is very committed to the delivery of mayoral strategic authorities. And it is clear that if councils do not work together and come up with proposals for the footprint of a mayoral strategic authority, then the government will decide for them. So the timetable is flexible, but it's clear what the end destination is. The government's intention is that all parts of England shall be incorporated in a mayoral strategic authority, which will make decisions on big strategic infrastructure projects, secure money from central government for some of those projects, and be in the position to lever in other forms of external funding, some of it private. We've had a lot of presentations on functioning mayoral strategic authorities, and although I remain somewhat reluctant to be going down this route, I can see there are some advantages clearly in terms of the ability to lever in much needed external funding, and I think as long as you get the governance arrangements right, there's no reason particularly to be fearful of an all-powerful mayor. There are good examples of mayors being obliged to work with all of the councils in the areas covered by the mayoral strategic authorities, and being able to do so in a way that ensures mayors cannot make independent decisions. They have to make them collaboratively with those other council leaders. And that helps, I think, give some reassurance. We're not just going to be obliged to do things that may from our perspective, not be in our interests. We are, as a group of councils, engaged with discussion with councils in neighbouring areas to see whether there is any scope for creating something bigger than a Berkshire mayoral strategic authority. And there are a number of options being considered. The discussions have not yet reached a point of consensus between the councils on what the proper geography should be. But there is a recognition amongst all of the councils involved in these discussions that whether we like it or not, we are going to end up in a mayoral strategic authority of one form or another, and we should prepare for it to be in the best position we can be. And that really is the background to the decision made by the Berkshire Prosperity Board to appoint an interim programme director to be able to organise what is essentially a complex work programme to get us in the position we can be in the strongest place possible to deal with a mayoral strategic authority. And there's a lot of work to be done. It's really beyond, I think, the capacity of the existing methods of staffing the Berkshire Prosperity Board, which is essentially sharing out responsibilities between the 6 councils. The reason we are making this decision, or rather we are making the appointment process, or overseeing the appointment processes, we are the accountable body. Wokingham is the accountable body because it's the body that was judged to be in the strongest position to handle the finances that would come in, the external finances, and ensure they were dealt with in the appropriate way. But that gives us other responsibilities, including new appointments like this. But the final appointment itself will be made, as Louise said, by a panel made up of the leaders or their representatives from all of the 6 unitary councils. So this isn't a decision ultimately for us to make. It's been made by the Berkshires Prosperity Board, and all we're really in charge with is implementing it in our role as the accountable body. So we're not being asked to approve this in that sense. We're just being asked to note what's going on.
I just want to make one point, which is on the back of the page, which is the report, I think, which is the financial implications.
Yes, I should have said something on that.
Yes.
The reason the financial implications appear as naught is because this post is fully funded from a portion of the interest on the monies inherited from the LEP. So this isn't money that will come from Wokingham taxpayers. This is money that was given to the LEP by central government, and this is the interest. We're deploying the interest to cover these costs. Yeah.
Most of my concerns about this are nothing to do with recruitment or HR or anything to do with that. My concerns, I think, are, well, they've been expressed in the email I sent. I fundamentally have a problem with this, and I'm concerned that it will cost taxpayers a lot of money and be quite ineffective, regardless of whether it's central taxpayers or local taxpayers, it's still tax. I'm interested to know what else that LEP money could be spent on, and I'm also interested to know who gets the final decision about whether we bid for this, but I'm conscious that that isn't really a matter for this committee, so I'd appreciate an answer to the questions, but I'm not going to hold this meeting up for that.
No, well, I'll try and give you a brief answer now. In essence, whether we like it or not, saying no is not really an option. It is going to happen, and I think we're better to engage with the process and try and get the best possible deal for Wokingham from it that we can get. That's my view. You in your emails that you exchanged earlier with us, talked about the LGA saying councils could decide not to go down this route. Well, they can in theory. In practice, they won't be able to decide not to, because as I said, the government have said they want no orphans. Buckinghamshire is currently refusing to engage with the process, but Buckinghamshire will sooner or later be told where it's going to go, and it will have lost any ability to determine who it should partner with. So I would rather we engaged with it. I have similar concerns to you about its usefulness. Believe you me, I would rather not be spending the many hours I am having to address issues relating to this, and having to be very diplomatic in the way I engage with other people on this. It would be nice not to have that. There's lots of other things I'd rather do, but I think it is necessary, and I think it is important that we engage. The alternative to not engaging is having it all done to you, rather than having any say on how it's done.
I think that's a matter of your risk appetite as far as when you think you're going to get rid of this government versus how long.
Well, I remind
versus how long the veto lasts.
I remind you what I said right at the beginning, Pauline. The previous government was committed to devolution as well.
I didn't agree with that either, Steve.
Yeah, no, but it's not a simple question of whether a change of government would make any difference.
It's slightly different, I think. But anyway, we can
I
agree to differ. I think we agree on most things.
Yeah, I think the point really is, I think it's better to be in a process, trying to influence it so that we can get the best possible deal for Wokingham that we can. I don't know whether I'll be successful in that, but if we don't try, we certainly won't be successful. And I think that's preferable just to saying no, because saying no will mean it happens, but you have very little ability to shape how it happens.
Veto, is there not? Sorry, there is currently a veto on this, is there not?
Well, no, there isn't a veto. If the simple fact is, if a bid goes into government, and ultimately, one of, I really can't kind of go into the detail I'd like to go into, which would be helpful, but it's confidential, and I can't at this stage divulge all this. But the process is initiated by a letter being sent to particular authorities in relation to both LGR, Local Government Reorganisation, and DEVO. And a letter has been sent to a neighbouring authority, which has initiated this process. And that letter makes it clear what's required of them. So we're engaged in discussion on that basis.
Thank you. As I say, it isn't really a personnel issue, so I look forward to a longer discussion.
Super, thank you very much. Prue.
I just wanted to check something. Apart from agreeing with Stephen entirely, I'm very not a fan of investing a lot of power in a single individual in a mayoral authority. It's not how I would do it. I do think it's coming down the line at us, and it's better to engage. This is a decision. It's not really a decision for this council. That's the thing. The decision to appoint this person is been made by the Prosperity Board, and all we are doing is enacting something because we're the accountable authority. So we don't actually have a decision to make, and we can't say we're not participating because as part of the Berkshire Prosperity Board we are participating, and that's it, isn't it? And it's not costing us anything.
It isn't costing us anything. No. You're quite correct. It isn't costing us anything. The note, it is worth drawing attention to the fact the recommendation is, again, that famous word, to note, and we're noting two actions that we're required to note, but they're not really actions over which this committee, this board, has any jurisdiction.
However, it is important for transparency that we have it.
Yeah.
I think.
What makes it awkward for me personally is there is much I would like to have said to you that would have given you even fuller understanding of the background, but I can't at this stage say.
Thank you, Pauline.
Just one final quick comment. Thank you very much for the transparency, because you didn't have to do that.
Perfect. And my understanding of this very much was because it's a significant piece of recruitment, even though it's not in line maybe with some of the other recruitment that we would normally look at. It was good to make sure that this committee was aware of it. I had one question, and I always, of course, have these discussions with Lou up front, so Lou knows what I'm going to ask. And that was, this is it's a fixed-term job, it's part-time, and it's for somebody very senior. Do we think that we're likely to be successful in filling it?
Not sure.
Yeah.
I mean, we are, it has gone out internally, so just so you're aware, all of my equivalent roles in Berkshire have all been part of this process, and they have all confirmed that it's been advertised internally within their councils. So best endeavours, we will look to obviously recruit to it. We will also look externally as well if the internal process isn't successful. But there's something to be said about knowing the councils, etc., that we're working to. But we will support wherever we possibly can. You are correct, it is meant to be at tier 2, and yes, at this point in time, it's been described as a 3 to 4 day a week role. So, yeah.
But it's a very interesting role, I suspect, for the right person with the right skill set.
Absolutely, yes.
To do something extremely significant for this area.
Yes, definitely.
Super. Thank you very much. Are there any more questions, or can we bring the meeting to a close? Thank you very much, everybody. Super.